Hello, hello. Welcome to First Person, the show where we meet the most interesting people in IT and learn from them what makes them tick by focusing only on their firsts. I'm your host, Matt Egan, asking you to enjoy, like, and subscribe wherever you find us. And if you're an interesting person in IT, do let us know because you might be the next first person. The next voice you hear will be today's guest. He is Ian Mountford. Originally from the UK and now based out of Sydney, Australia, Ian is a senior consultant in cyber governance, risk, and compliance. Ian has a special interest in helping people transition into cybersecurity careers late in their careers. He's also someone I will tell you I have known as a personal friend outside of IT for 25 years now. So I can tell you with 100% assurance that he is definitely one of the most interesting people in IT. And we're delighted to have him as a guest on First Person. So, Ian, welcome. And first up,
Well,
the question we always ask: what's the first thing people should know about you?
well, you set me up and then you've knocked me off by telling everybody that we used to play football. That was the deal.
Ah,
We played, God, where were we? Where were we? Clapham Junction. We used to run around, didn't we? And I used to shout at everybody, like I'd still do it now. Like,
yeah, I think you and I are both two of the great shouters on a
oh,
soccer
we
field.
loved it. I
Yeah.
got I got so much out of it. It got all of my like yayas out. We used to just
Yeah.
to
Yeah, there's
just
something to be
run.
said for that. There's probably a management lesson to be learned from the benefits of team sports for certain, but also just and I think it's principally a male thing, but men expressing their rage against the world through the medium of sporting activity,
But
which you and I
that's how it
certainly did.
is.
Yeah.
But there's part of that, and I think it still plays out in all aspects. If I hadn't have played sport, I wouldn't have any friends. I
Yeah.
I literally would have struggled in life, and I got so much from team sports that's translated out into all the environments.
Mhm.
So, first of all, it needs to be said that you've smashed it through your career, obviously, and it's a pleasure to talk to you. This hopefully will be a conversation that's entertaining as much as anything else, because like as Matt knows, and people that know me well, my journey has been very bouncy from side to side. And the journey to get into this career, this cyber career, is just the same. So yeah, it's a
Yeah.
pleasure to be here and talk to you. People like the sport that I've done and the sport that me and Matt did was proper soggy Sunday mornings and just like, limping for 3 days. And I think we still wish we could do it now because it was such a
Yes.
fun thing to do. But
Yeah.
yeah, they were happy days there. And then look, they still are now when we can get when we can get out there. But yeah, it's worth it.
Well, that's really interesting, and Ian, and that takes us nicely into our first section, which we call First Things First. And this is where we like to get to know about our guest by understanding some of their first times. One of the reasons I really wanted to get you on this show is you've got a really interesting story about your journey through your career and then into IT and cyber quite late on. So please, if you could, would you tell us something about your first job in IT and how you got there?
Yeah. Long story short, arrive in Australia 2016, get fished, telephone number ported. I think it was around $20,000 Australian taken out of the bank account,
Wow.
pop to see the police, have to change hundreds of passwords. Um, it was a very simple scam where people broke into letterboxes in the eastern suburbs in around Bondi and Randwick and some of these areas in eastern suburbs of Sydney, where they'll collect piles and piles of post, open the post. If they can then get a Facebook profile with a telephone number against it and make that call, they can triangulate. And next thing you know, they're telling you they've got their um, hospital results. And I said, well, I haven't been to hospital. Oh, what's your date of birth? You give the date of birth. Next thing you know, they've got date of birth, telephone number, name, and they can then set up a prepaid number. And that was the end of that. Policeman comes round, shows me what they've done. We had a conversation where he told me that the guys that did it would go to prison for 3 months and then come back out and start another 3 schemes. And I said, "Are you ever gonna stop this? Are you ever gonna get on top of it?" And he went, "There's no way we can do it. We just haven't got the resources." So I'd done consulting, I'd done marketing, what I like HR, all sorts of stuff in the past, recruitment. And I thought, look, it's probably about time, mid to late 40s, where I did something where I had to get some solidity in terms of knowledge. I've always been a learner. I'm very keen on learning consistently. And I thought I've got to put myself to the test here. So I thought IT is going to be a solid career for me until I retire. I'm like 40. I think I was 48, 49 when I made the decision to swap. You and me changed some messages, and I said, "What about cyber?" And you went, "Go for it." Which, um, on reflection, was probably one of the best things you've ever said to me. I did the I like at this point I'd never done anything IT before, so I did CompTIA A plus to see whether I could understand the difference between plugs and sockets and how a network worked, and the basics of cyber. Passed the 2 exams, got lucky. At that point, still didn't know what to do, and then started applying for help desk jobs because I thought I've got to show people that I'm willing. I've got to eat a bit of poo and just go through the process and dig in and say, okay, I can do this. I'm old, but I'm happy to do this work. Didn't get anything. It must have applied for 30, 40 jobs, was getting a bit disillusioned. So thought I'll start the degree course. I started the cybersecurity degree course. Lucky me, left school at 16 with no real qualifications apart from a few GCSEs, got C in maths. Second week, second project, discrete maths, graph
Yeah.
theory, 40, 40 hours we were given a week for study. And they said, look, it'll probably take you between 5 to 8 hours a week to do each of the maths parts. The first week I spent 40 hours doing graph theory.
Wow.
I, I got through it, loved it. Found actually some value in maths that I'd never seen before. Couldn't Still in my stupid head, couldn't work out how I was going to be doing that on a daily basis, but stuck with it. And the tutor at that point was excellent, helped me to actually get a credit out of it rather than just a pass, which is what I was hoping for. But it showed me that the diligence that you need to sort of dig into something and pull it apart was going to get me forwards. So I had a conversation with the tutor on the course who said, look, you're never going to be a technical person. Don't try and go for technical GRC for cyber jobs. It's not going to work for you. Have you heard of governance, risk and compliance? You don't need to be a coder. You can get stuck in, start to know the concept, start to use your consulting skills and see how that goes with clients. It's a steep learning curve, but you can do it if you get a chance. I applied to CyberCX, which is the big brand down here, or was at the time, and managed to get on their kind of first associate program that they ran. And by hook or by crook, I found myself then in exactly the right position for me at exactly the right time. I bundled through project management certificates. I bundled through as many things as I could stack up to help me on day one be ready. Got my Excel skills polished. I was going in really fresh, but it worked out, and we're still
But,
here.
there's a lot of amazing things in there, right? First of all, and I've known you a long time. Like you've had many careers, and you've been very senior in a lot of those careers, despite leaving school at 16. To your point, without what would be conventionally seen as great qualifications. Albeit, I think your professional sporting career probably helped you with some of the kind of skills and experiences that you pick up along the way. But amazing that you had the thought and then the courage to say, right, I'm going for this now. This is the thing to do. Very obvious that there isn't a clear path, right? There isn't a way of doing this. So you did some certification, then you went. So did you complete the degree, or did you from the degree modules go into the job?
Well, what they told me at that point was, you're better off now pointing yourself in the direction of
Yeah.
certifications.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, look, I've invested in a year of my life going deep on this course. Do I want to do another 3 years of it? Probably not. Is it going to hurt my career if I put it to one side?" They said, "Look, you've proved the point. You're through the door. Now start to look at more
Yeah.
specific bespoke qualifications." And that was perfect for me. It really
Well,
helped to have.
that's kind of one of the things that really comes through here in this story, right? Is that the tutor had your best interests at heart and knew enough from an academic background to understand what you needed from a professional
Correct.
background, which isn't always the case, right? There's a whole debate, particularly in the US, about the degree versus certification.
I think
I
it's
think,
one of the biggest problems.
yeah,
It's sorry to cut you off. It's one of the massive problems is that me being me, having worked in careers and HR recruitment and being kind of in a help people type mindset, it's quite interesting for me to approach people in the industry. And even when I was in the industry at the early days, trying to work out what my pathway was going to be, very keen to do more learning, very sort of focused on doing the right things and not wasting time based on being old. And I can recall having a few conversations with people, and I was shocked at how little information there was out there, which I changed a bit now. There's a lot of YouTube channels, a lot of people talking a lot of sense about what the job entails and what it's about. But at the same time, I think there's a lack of professional structure, and everybody's trying to pimp their own courses at you. Like, come and do this, come and do ISACA, come and do this, come and do that. And it confuses the hell out of most people because they think that's the gateway
yeah,
to getting a job, and it's not the gateway at all in some cases. And there can be some people that get into these careers in GRC that are overqualified in some ways, but kind of have never tested and demonstrated it. So they're getting
well,
everything. They think they've got to get it, and they don't necessarily need all of it, but they
yeah.
need to be able to apply some of it, and then they'll be a bit more successful.
Well, and to a couple of the points you've made there, right? In your previous life, you've had roles as a consultant, you've had roles in a customer facing role, you've had intern. So that side of things was never going to be a challenge for you.
Yeah.
Um, but understanding the level of technical detail that you need to have in order to advise people kind of was. So I also think it really stands out like the diligence of doing the work in that year one of your course probably really helped you, right? In terms of like picking up some core principles. Um, but also one of the challenges I think is, and you kind of referenced this, is there's competing needs and desires on behalf of the people offering training. So certifications are often tied to specific vendors and platforms, and the universities obviously want people to do their courses. And then the other thing is, this is such a fast moving space. One of the reasons why I think you're a good example of why senior people who've had experience going into cyber is a really valuable thing, because things change so quickly. If you start a 4 or 3 year degree, the chances are what you learned at the beginning might not be that relevant by the end.
That's a huge
Anyway,
point. That's a huge point. And I think I think we're a bit lost in this education system.
yeah,
And I think it's what it's doing, it's putting up barriers that are stopping people that have strong skills, strong, they can communicate really well. They understand the concepts at a high level, but they can apply their approach and understand the way that we do the work that we do to assess and audit clients and get to the nub of what the problems are. But they look at these massive walls that there are to get over in
yeah,
terms of trying to be the man when or woman when it comes to doing the job and being a cyber person. It's it
yeah,
seems to be pushing people out because I've had a few conversations with people. Like I did a talk last year at one of the conferences, the big CyberCon down here for the Australian Information Security Association, and it was just a little kind of like I thought there'd be three people and a dog. It was literally careers in cyber for mature changers, job changers. And I thought, look, there'll be a couple of randoms like me might turn up. I got like 30 people just suddenly swarmed on me at this desk. And I ended up just doing a Q&A with everybody. And there were so many people I felt very who some of them I think were going to struggle, but there were a lot of them, and I would say probably 70 to 80% who were stood there just frantic and helpless
Mm.
because they just couldn't see the roots. They couldn't
Yeah.
see how they were going to be able to make it work. They were bringing bags of experience, some of them. And I was thinking to myself that if there was a much more kind of unified, it may be a country by
Yeah.
country approach, but some even at those early stages back to like when we were at school, we had one route that we took that got us off the start line and you got it or you didn't, and then you carried on. And I think we're struggling. There's a skills shortage in our industry. There's not there's not a lack of people that want to do the
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
There, there's so many people that are thinking you could just transition into this out of networking or not. Like I came across a guy, one role, it just couldn't apply what he knew, but he'd been working on the plugs and sockets for 20 years, and it was like it's getting people to that start line with an engine that's fully revved up, ready to go, and they've got the power to last the whole race, if you know what I mean. I don't know if that's a pretty crap,
Totally.
but but
No,
it
I like
uh,
it. We're
it's
we're
how
big
you're
fans of.
structuring people, getting them ready to go. It's like a big
Yeah.
deal.
No, it definitely is, and I think your point about the skills shortage is really, really valuable. And I think that actually goes across all of IT. People who have good life experiences, but maybe don't have the technical chops, can be taught the technical things. Um, I think that that's something I think about it often in the context of the way we lose women from the industry because of parenting. Like it's such a loss of talent kind of thing.
It's a
But
disaster. It's a disaster, and I don't think it's difficult to fix. This is the
uh,
thing. I think it's all these competing pressures and the lobby and the money and it's all these things that are adding these barriers that are making what should be just a hurdle you step over
yeah.
into this kind of crazy assault course. It's not right. But hey, who am I to say?
Yeah, well, let's find out who you are to say it because we are here to focus on you,
Yeah.
and we left you to go into that very interesting conversation. We left you having found your place as a
Yes.
consultant,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
and was that one of the questions we ask at this point? Is the first time you thought this is the industry for me, or I could be good at this? Was that point? Did you find your feet in the because you can do the consulting, right? You're a communicator. You're someone who likes to help people. Like immediately, was that something that worked out for you, or like was it, how did that go?
No, God, you sit through a couple of calls quite quickly, and you're getting in our position, we get to meet CISOs, we get to meet heads of information security, we get to meet CIOs, we get to meet board members and talk to them about what they do in their organization, and we're asking them very specific questions, heads of IT, technology leads, all sorts of different people. And those first few conversations, when people start talking terminology, they're just like straight over the top.
Right.
And that fear factor that we all have, doesn't matter how confident you are, when you hear a term that you've never heard before, someone's
Yeah.
looking at you, they're nodding as if to say, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? And you're like, yeah, like
But
like
how do you handle that, Ian? Because, like, experience tells me now, ask,
that, you
right?
know, the getting
Yeah.
honesty, it's you can't just pretend, and I
No.
think it was a very early learning for me to be put in that position and feel, and I talked to one of the managers early on, and I was like, this is a stretch. We don't know this information. Could you have primed me a little bit better to help me and get me?" And it was, for me, it was taking myself right back to 16 first weeks of working the bank when I first started working in the UK. And how did I get over those hurdles? No, I didn't go straight to the pub, which is what we did in those days. But and like now, it's very much more about communication.
Yeah.
I had to adapt myself to a brand new environment. There was an expectation because I was older that I would know all this stuff. And I was like, hands up, I need
Yeah.
to just a little bit
But you got to
slow.
ask. Yeah. You have to ask, and I think that is another example where maybe at 16 you wouldn't. Right? Maybe at 16 you'd kind of feel like you needed to pretend, whereas with experience of life and work, you're confident enough to say, "Sorry, can I stop you there? I don't actually understand what that term means. Can you explain it to me?" Kind of thing.
I think it's an interesting point to make as well. I think that over time, the people that you work with can help you to give confidence or they can take it away. And
Mhm.
some consulting environments are much better structured than others in terms of helping to kind of facilitate you as a consultant, let's say, and grow those skills. It's the same in any job environment. Some are great, good leads, good managers, they give you a little bit runway, and others don't. And I think in some consulting environments across the world, it must be the same that you sink or swim and you kind of adapt and you evolve and you do all those
Yeah.
key things to do so. But I think the responsibility and one thing that I've taken from the jobs that I've had and the mistakes that I've made has been very much around doing the things that I know myself that I can do better and working on the things that I can improve, whether it's being more organized in terms of time, whether it's taking better notes, whether it's being clearer in my own knowledge before I get on a call when I'm working on something that I've not worked on before. And especially I think the fear of technology and the terminology that goes with it, I think fills a lot of people full of
Yeah.
dread. And I
Yeah.
think it probably leads to a few people to flip out where you've got to back yourself. It's like most things in life, then, Matt. You know this. You've worked in environments where you've been in circumstances and situations. You're in a boardroom that you've not been in before. You're dealing with a client on a topic that you've not covered. You've got to back yourself to be confident in that environment. And I
Yeah.
think they're skills that we don't get a lot of soft skills training, if any, in terms of the work that we do. And I think the whole technology environment until you probably get to the levels of seniority where these things are an expectation. I think some of the consulting staff could probably, the more junior levels will benefit from soft skill stuff as well, because it's
Well, it's
crucial.
also
It's crucial
it's
across the
also
board.
another argument for more experienced people coming into the industry, right? Is you're able to do that. And a couple of things to pick at, right? Well, one last thing in the success bit before we get to the failures, which you trailed there, and I'm very excited to go there. But like you mentioned, like leadership and management, and I'm interested in this from actually the whole of your career, going back to 16. Like, if you could, one of the questions we ask is the first great boss kind of thing. It doesn't have to be the first, but I'd love to hear from you, about a great boss and the things you've learned from them over your career.
Great boss. They listened. And I think this is one of those things that I started working 88. And the first 4 to 6 years were a bit of a blur. I walked around a bank with a piece of paper and everybody thought I was busy, and that was kind of what I thought that I did, was just carry a piece of paper around all the time. But the first boss sat me down and talked straight to me, explained the things I needed to do in language that I understood,
Mm.
made me listen by telling me that I wasn't listening, and was direct with me in terms of explaining what I was not doing right. But what he did was he built a relationship with me. And it's somebody that I'm still in contact with now. He's now in his early 80s. I didn't see him this time when I went back, but I know he's back to the UK, but I know he's kind of a bit old and getting a bit ill now. But I have the ultimate respect for him, because a lot of leaders at that point just talk to us in words that suited them, but we didn't really understand.
Yeah.
And he actually got to know us as people that were working for him, and we built relationships where we did end up socializing, and we did a few things outside of work together. But when we worked, we knew if we were on his time, we needed to deliver. And we did some very specific things. I was getting into a sales role at that time in the bank. It was sort of later on in my career. And I was doing some very basic sales, rudimentary sales things for insurance products, but it involved building relationships with customers. And this was just like news to me completely. I didn't think, it was just transactional. But when
Yeah.
you actually had a conversation with the customer, they told you the things that you wanted to hear, and we were taught that that was how we translated that into sales for products. And I think the thing that it filters through into everything I've done through my career, but even now, especially, the more we listen to the client, God, we find out things that the client's not even trying to tell us. We can work things out, and we can probe a bit and use the right kinds of questions, and it all stems to this guy who basically said, "Look, you need to know these things. You don't know them now because you've just, you know,
How could
fallen
you?
off the wall."
Yeah.
But yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that in the industry that I'm in now, and I think when I see people that I work with who I admire, of which there are a lot, they have listening skills that
Yeah.
are way beyond the basics,
Yeah. And
and
also,
serious skills that take training and they take patience and they take diligence and an approach, a really specific approach. But God, they listen really well. They use silence properly, like it's things like that.
yeah, and it's kind of the empathetic nature of that boss who was quite a senior person to go to the 16-year-old and invest the time knowing they're gonna get something back. Again, these are transferable things, right? Whatever industry you're in, that is and whatever role you're in, that's extremely useful. So Ian, thank you so much. Like, this is amazing. Like, we've seen you through this challenging journey, and like now it is very cool. And on a personal level, I love the fact that you found
Yeah,
this
cool.
career that is your métier. But it's too positive, frankly. We're not only here for the good things. I want to hear some bad things, right? And we do learn more from our mistakes, which I know is something that you definitely sort of hold dear and live by. So I wonder if you could tell me anything about the first big mistake, and that can be in cyber, or maybe it's outside of that, but definitely professionally. Like, is where does your brain go when I ask you about your
I'd
first
go
big
into cyber because I think it's an important one for people when they're making decisions around careers. I joined a small company, and I joined this company off the back of a conversation, and it was a bit of a nudge and a wink. I didn't do too much due diligence, and I found myself in a scenario with a they'll probably listen to this, fair play if they do, but I think it was recognized where things had gone wrong at the time. And I found myself in a situation where it was a former IT person who had become a security guru without any training, without any real experience, bar writing policies for people over a number of years. Um, ask ask this guy networking questions; he could answer them all day long. But ask anything related to security and regulations and compliance and privacy and things like this. There was some big gaps. So he gave some advice to a client during a call where I was this junior person on the call, but I immediately challenged it after the call with the guy, and I was like, "Oh, I don't think this is right. Can you just tell me where that came from?" And immediately the answer I got was a very negative one. It was a I'd poked the bear in that case, and I had to leave that role fairly sharpish. But what it did, it heightened my awareness, and it made me realize that you've got to like, because so many people want to get into security now and cyber because there's
Yeah,
so many in it, and there's a lot of clients that need the solution. And I thought that it would be good to test myself in a smaller environment and actually see how that felt after some big brands and big firms the first few years. And yeah, it was a shock to the system, and it made me reflect on that amount of due diligence that you need to do. Just because people have been in the industry for 20 years or purport to be in the industry for 20 years, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to do a great job for clients. And I think that was a huge learning point for
yeah.
me.
Well,
Learning point.
I think the diligence thing is particularly um, apparent at the minute, right? Because we are in this world where there's a skill shortage, but there's also like lots of people are losing their jobs, right? Economy are contracting, and I do think like it's uh, very difficult to hold yourself to that diligence, but it's very important that you do. Like that job that you had there was not right for you at that time. It probably was fine for somebody else, right? Maybe
Yeah.
and equally, something we often hear on this show is like the value of at the right point in your career working for the big org because you will get the training and the
Yeah.
support.
And
But
again, it can be frustrating. And I've been self-employed for many years. I've sat in sales meetings and sold things to people and done some decent sized deals that have fed me and my wife and family for a long time, right? but at the same time, that doesn't mean that you've got all the all the radars are working all the time. And sometimes you get into a conversation where something feels good and you feel like it's worth flipping the coin on it, and it doesn't play out. And I think it's the big company could sometimes feel restrictive. The big corporates always can, because there's a limitation to the amount of scope that you've got to work in. And sometimes the law of the smaller firm and a little bit more flexibility in some way can be very attractive. This was cool because I could ride my bike there every day, and I loved like I was there every day. But like you have to be serious. I think the career that we're in here and the reputation that you have to go. Forget you. If you're going to give advice to people, and you're going to work in it in consulting as an advisor when it comes to cyber, you've got to have, you've got to be above kind of questionable decisions. You've got to be very confident that you're telling people the right kind of advice. So I think that's a big deal.
Yeah. Well, and I think to your point, like the original point, right? Diligence when choosing the next step is really important. And different and timing's everything, right? Like that might have been a perfectly fine role for you later on if you had enough sort of credibility on your own 2 feet. Um, another way of asking a similar question, but I'm really interested to hear this from you, given your experiences working in
Yeah.
cyber. Like, what was the first time you realized something you thought you knew, may be wrong, may not be true, right? Like, especially coming into this industry
Yeah.
from the
It was
outside.
the cert stuff. It was all the stuff about certs. I don't want to dwell on
Yeah,
it because it's mildly disinteresting if you're not in that position where you're starting, because you've kind of been through it and you've seen it. But I think a shake up of that side of things, even if it's on a geography by geography basis.
yeah,
This there's a slide that some really clever person has put together, and it's like a spreadsheet with columns, and it's got all the different routes you can take for every different type of IT role. It's a mess. I'll send it to you. I'll find a link and you can pop
yeah.
it in.
Please do. Yeah,
Isn't it?
yeah,
It's one of those things when you look at it, it looks like somebody's just been sick on the page. It's as confusing as I'm making it sound.
yeah,
And I think that accurately demonstrates the problems that we face, because
yeah.
when you think you know you're doing the right thing, and then somebody comes and tells you that that is quite far away from what it is you're actually trying to achieve, and or you can do something in a quarter of the time, because time is a massive factor, right? You can do that 4-year degree, but you can realize very quickly that a GRC career doesn't necessarily need that, and you don't need to be a Python scripter. Like
Yeah.
these things that you have to kind of work out. Um,
Well,
or you can read them.
especially in a
You know?
a time of
Like,
great change and late in your career, right? Like, you haven't got time to waste. And also probably, I mean, to go right back to the beginning when you talked about applying for help desk jobs, right? Not everyone can afford to do that as well, right? So like time is money as well in this instance. Okay,
yeah,
that's a great learning, Ian. I do wanna move on because I wanna get to
yeah,
section
move on, man.
5 firsts, because I know you're excited to do this. So
Yeah.
we want to get to know you beyond your professional veneer. I think I might know you a little bit too well beyond your professional veneer, but for
Might
the
do, man. You
for the
might do.
viewers and the listeners, let's find out about the real person using our random question generator. So please, if you would, Ian, pick a number between 1 and 15.
13.
Okay. I did know you were gonna say that because you trailed that before we met.
Yeah,
13.
but
Oh, okay. I am actually interested to hear this because you are a little bit older than me, and also you have displayed both good and terrible taste in music in our time, being friends. So I would like to know, please, Ian, something about the first, gig you attended.
all my life. Um, Now there's variations on this,
We'll
and
have
I'm
'em.
gonna go for the one I went to on my own, or with friends rather than with my sister. I went to Luther Vandross at the NEC, and he was so cool. He's the proper crooner. For people that don't know, he's I think he's probably retired now, isn't he?
Ian
But
passed away.
he was just laying it out, but his voice was amazing, and to this day he was awesome.
How old would you have
Yeah, he
been,
was
Ian?
awesome. Oh, I'd have been 16, 17. Yeah.
So 16 or 17
Bon
year old
Jovi was next.
Ian.
Bon Jovi was next.
Well, and that's quite a
Indoor
switch, mate, right? To go from to go,
literally. And
yeah,
David Bowie was next after that. I've got to get
yeah.
some credibility. So I
No,
watched
no,
Luther Vandross and I thought that was great. Dave
it's
Bon Jovi, they had a runway down the middle of the crowd, and
yes, they
we're
did.
at the oh, awesome, awesome. I'll never forget.
I mean,
But it
you
has
shouldn't
to be
give him
Luther. Luther
credibility.
was
I don't believe in guilty pleasures, right? It's pleasures. Luther Vandross was an amazing artist. You like Luther
oh,
Vandross, that's totally fine. It's just, to me, the image of 16 or 17-year-old Ian from, from from the Midlands of England, vibing out to Luther Vandross is just a somewhat amusing image, but there's nothing wrong with
it
it.
was a happy, happy day, mate.
Yeah,
It was a
yeah,
happy
okay.
day.
Let's go for one more, please. Can you give me one more number between 1 and 15?
9.
Number 9 is here we go. The first thing you would buy if you won the lottery. If money was no object, Ian,
Oh, yeah, I'd
right,
buy Wolves, mate.
Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club. Yeah, it'd be quite expensive because they are owned by a large Chinese conglomerate, and they play in the English Premier
Be
League.
a very large. It would have to be a Powerball, number
Yeah.
one. It would be. It would. What I would do. What I would do is I would go down the Birmingham Tom Brady route.
Uh-huh.
Have you seen the new thing on Prime?
No,
It's
I
very
have
good.
heard about it. I don't like to watch it
It's
because
very, very good.
very early
It's
on they
very good.
beat Leeds, so I don't want to watch
It's
it.
very good. But what they've done, which is smart, because he's such a winner, he's not just there as I'm the money man. He's actually in with the coach. He's texting all the players. He's getting right in there. And I'd love to get, you know, who would be the person that we would install into that structure
A
that would be
serial winner. Sure that's you, Ian, I would have thought at this point.
no, it ain't me. Of course, it ain't me. No, it's somebody. It's somebody of huge cred that's won everything. It'd be like, who would it be? It like I'm not a United fan. You know that as well as anybody. But it would be somebody like Roy Keane. It would be one of those kind of like, I'm gonna set a fire under you if you don't like. This is what you need as a player. This is your roadmap for how you're going to win everything.
Yeah.
And that is what we would do.
I think
That
it's a revealing answer. It's a cool answer. I like it. Like if I was running the same fantasy, I would buy Leeds United, my soccer team, or maybe it would be. It doesn't really work in US sports, so no point buying the 49. So it'd be Leeds United. But what I would want to do is kind of liberate them from the financial reality of modern sport and
yes,
just get
yes.
back to where it was like you are a club that represents a community. We're going to put equal effort into the women's team as
Oh,
well as the men's team.
oh,
We're going to have disability sport. We're going to run other sports alongside the soccer team. We're going to keep ticket prices to 20 quid and build a massive stadium and like
you know,
just really
you
kind of
know, you know the same as me because you're involved in sport and still coaching and still trying to make grassroots sports work. If you could translate the passion and enthusiasm that people like you and me will have to a dead about sport, and if you can infuse that into the professional game and, and get the community to buy in,
yeah.
you got because I think that's one of the smarter things that Brady and his man are doing, are that they're trying to do it an okayish way, but they've got that add-on that they've got the all-time great in terms of
Yeah.
performance in one area, and they've managed to somehow get him texting these players who are journeyman Can you imagine you and
Oh
me
yeah.
getting a text from Ian Rush on a Sunday morning? You know what I mean? Can you
Yeah.
imagine that? We'd
Yeah.
have been on fire. We'd have won everything. And I
Yeah.
think as well as getting the community, I love that aspect. But I think if
Yeah.
you could infuse that layer of kind of old school, metal studs and all that, like somebody that's been there and done it and
Yeah.
is like, "You gotta listen to me because I know this is gonna work." Oh, that's the
Oh,
cocktail. That's the
yeah.
cocktail, isn't it?
Well, you better get yourself buying a lottery ticket then. Excellent, Ian. Thank you so much. Right, listen, I'm sad to say we're coming to our final section, our first and final
Do it.
thought, and I need to leave
Do it.
some time because I suspect it might take a little time. But we kind of covered this. But I'd love to hear from you the first piece of advice you give to people who are starting out, and let's do that in the context of what we're talking about, right? People who
Yeah.
do come to you and say, "How do I make this transition?"
Look on my LinkedIn. There's a lady I spoke to in the last 3 months who's just got her first job. She came to that talk a year ago. She did a recommendation for me. Her name's Emily, and I'll tell you what I told her. Help, put your hand up. Don't suffer in silence. There's a lot of people that can help you. There's a lot of people that won't help you, but at the same time, everybody's busy. Be respectful of their time, but you've got to put your hand in the air. I as that little bit on my profile in LinkedIn says, I will respond to people who are helpful because so many people have given me a help, not just in this career, but for years and years and years. You've got to put your hand up. You've got to be prepared to interview people. And I say that where you need to really have key questions that are going to make people go, oh, Emily got what she wanted because she didn't just say, "What do I do?" She actually thought about what it is that she was trying to achieve. And she asked me very key questions about what I did, the environment that I worked in, the kind of stuff we worked on, what her experience would be like, how it would work in this environment, or like all these different correct. But she thought about it and it was obvious that she thought about it. She got everything she wanted. I You've gotta be prepared, especially if you're older, you're gonna get a lot of knockbacks. You're gonna get a lot of frustration. You're gonna get that kind of FOMO stuff where the party's going on and you're not in it and
Mm,
you can't put up, "I've got another cert," like, every 2 minutes. But at the same time, you've gotta realize that if you can suffer in silence for a few months even, doesn't have to be years, you all this stuff will open up for you. You've just gotta demonstrate it, and you've gotta be comfortable digging in, working at times you don't necessarily want to work on things you don't necessarily want to work on, or you can't always see where it's going to end. And you've got to be like, this is me, I'm going to get this. And I think if you can adopt that kind of determined mindset where you're not going to be put off when people say no, and you're going to be smart. And when I say smart, I mean you're going to look at it from a slightly different angle and think, what do I offer? So what I did is I said to people, I can offer you this, this, this. I definitely haven't got this, but
mhm.
I've got these things. Do you want to talk about it? And people were like, yeah, go on. And that will still work to this day. I feel that will be strong. If somebody came to you, I'm interested in you. If somebody came to you and asked you for help, what would you do?
Offer to help, yeah, absolutely, because exactly as you've said, and actually you're by no means the first person in this series to offer this advice, right? Like human beings, we're social animals. We want to help other people, and if it's approached in the right way, as long as I've got the capacity, always, right? And it's not just because you never know when that person can help you. That is an element of it, but it's also because it's just nice to help, right? It feels good, and so somebody is willing to ask me for my help or advice and I've got something to offer, of course I'm gonna give it. Like, why not?
But that's the nature of people who have an understanding, like I think we both do, that we didn't get where we are on our own. And I think
Yeah,
that
100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, the idea of the self-made person is a total myth, right? I often talk about the difference between luck and good fortune, right? I don't believe luck is winning the lottery, right? If you end up as the owner of Wolves, it's because 'cause you've had good luck, right? But, like, look, fortune is being able to take advantage of the right situation at the right time, and you do have to make that yourself, but you're always reliant on environment, people, context. You and I were both born in the UK at a time of economic stability, right? Like, we'd already won kind of thing.
and look,
So
we're white.
I think
We got
it
like I've got 2 passports, like all these factors. Like, we are very privileged and lucky to be in the position that we're in, that we can never discount that. And I think what that does for me, that's why I coach women's football, because they need the help. It's why I think all that we do when we get to this point in our career, yeah, we need a good career. We need to sustain our families till the end, but we have to give people support to get in at the other end because we got it. Like it's just we've got to do. We're in a very privileged position.
I also think it's motivation and it's energy, right? Like, because you can do the job, but like people are the thing that most people get their energy from. And I final question, Ian, like, and maybe it related to that, but what was the first project or achievement? Like looking back at your career, and this can definitely go beyond cyber. What's the first thing you would want to tell people about? What's your masterpiece? What's the thing of which you're proudest? I guess.
I've got a masterpiece. I think I think being able to survive and thrive and be constantly in a mindset where I'm building, even
Mhm.
though I'm kind of on the downslope in terms of years. Like I don't expect, like I'd like to work as long as I can, and I think the way that our industry is going, I think that there's a strong possibility that the work's going to increase. It's not going to go away. But I would say that to survive and to thrive in an industry where the longer you stick at it, the better your skills get. And to be able to still feel, even at my career stage, and you know, I'm under 5 years in this industry. I've still got a lot ahead of me, and I still have the desire to do it. And it's not like I'm not one of these people that's chasing various different things. That I just like to think that every year I do this, the building blocks just keep coming. And I think my skill, like it's like you've been doing this job for years and years. You've gone through all those career hurdles where you've got to that point where you've polished off all the edges, you've smoothed it all off, and you're now at a point where you're like at the peak of your power. If you think from my perspective, I've done that in different careers, but to
Mm.
now I want to do it in this career. The drive and desire for me is to be able to keep building and keep putting layers on and be able to. I don't want to get to a point where I'm like, yeah, I've done it. That's never going to happen because everything changes so much
Yeah.
in this industry specifically. But for me to feel satisfied is to know that every year I can just keep adding layers on. And that's the thing that makes me happy.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. My thanks to Ian Mountford, and thanks to all of you for watching or listening to First Person, the show where we meet the most interesting people in IT and learn from them what makes them tick by focusing only on their first. I have been your host, Matt Egan, and I'm asking you to enjoy, like, and subscribe wherever you find us. And if you're an interesting person in IT, do let us know. You might be the next first person. But my final word has to go to my guest and friend. And thank you so much for an amazing conversation. Thank you, Ian Mountford.